Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Nicholas Callio.
I know you've been waiting for this since this morning. It's hard to know where to start with an introduction to Brad Tilden, so I thought I would start when he was 11 years old. Seriously, it's a great pleasure to welcome Brad. He is Alaska Air Group's chairman, president, and CEO. He is also vice chairman of Airlines for America, which we're very pleased about. Brad's a 26-year veteran of the Alaska Airlines. Prior to his time as chairman, he was president and CEO. He previously served as president, executive vice president of finance, CFO, and corporate controller. Before joining Alaska, Brad spent 8 years at the accounting firm of Price Waterhouse in Seattle and Australia. Alaska Airlines, Horizon Air, and now the newest addition, Virgin America, combined to make Alaska the 5th largest airline in the United States. The airline's fleet of 279 aircraft take customers to 118 destinations throughout the United States, Canada, Mexico, Costa Rica, and Cuba. Brad leads a team of 20,000 employees, and under his leadership, Alaska has been focused on safety and on-time performance, low fares, and creating an airline that people love. Alaska has received a number of accolades, including highest in customer satisfaction among traditional carriers in North America 10 years in a row, leading on-time performance 7 years running, #1 in the airline quality rating of performance and quality in 2016, and #1 spot on Wall Street Journal's annual scorecard for 4 years in a row. Brad himself was ranked 22nd among the top 50 corporate leaders in America by Fortune magazine. He was also named one of the top 25 most influential business travel executives of 2016 by Business Travel News, and was recognized by the Puget Sound Business Journal as its Executive of the Year. Brad also holds a commercial pilot's license, which you're going to hear a little bit about and see a little and understand a little more about when he comes up here in just a minute. Please join me in welcoming Brad Tilden.
Thanks very much, Nick. Thank you very much, Nick. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you, and just honored to be able to spend a few minutes with everybody. And I want to start out by expressing our sympathies for everybody that was whose lives have been impacted by both hurricanes. Our thoughts and prayers are with the people of Florida and the Caribbean and the people of Houston as well. I want to compliment my colleagues at the other airlines for their work to help people flee from Irma and recover from both Harvey and Irma. And there's just been a whole host of examples of fantastic things that they've done. After Harvey, Southwest airlifted cats and dogs to San Diego. They donated 5 million rapid reward points. Their customers and employees joined in and donated 148 million additional points for disaster relief. And just on my flight out yesterday, the captain of the airplane, which by the way is an Alaska Airlines captain, showed me a picture on his iPhone of a dog that Southwest had rescued. So that was kind of fun to see. Ahead of Irma's landfall, Southwest added extra flights. American Airlines added a lot of flights, largely wide bodies, to get people out of harm's way. And of course, American and JetBlue were lauded for capping fares at $99 to get people out. Even today, Robin Hayes, one of our competitors, is down in that area with his employees and a care team helping to bring aid to people down in that area. So it's really impressive, the things that people do when they find others in need and they find themselves in a position to help. And while all of us compete really aggressively every day in this industry, I, for one, am really proud to stand side by side by these fantastic people who, when they have a chance and an opportunity to help people, they do so. So my thanks and compliments to all of my competitors out there in this industry. As some of you might know, we've been spending a lot more time in California this year as we work to integrate Virgin America. When we visit Silicon Valley, meet with tech leaders, I've heard them use this phrase that caught my attention, and they say, you've got to build the plane while you're flying it, or rebuild the plane while you're flying it. And I just got to say, that's a horrible idea. That's not something we want to be doing. But I think the FAA agrees with that, but I think I understand the point. And when the difference between success and failure is the ability to change quickly, the clear message is that we need to continually improve our industry. And unlike companies in California, where they're literally transforming the world with driverless cars and Tesla is putting solar tiles that look like roof shingles on the roof of a car, and Apple's rolling out a new iPhone all the time. We are stuck with many legacy procedures and technology that have really become an obstacle to change. And as leaders in the industry, it is our responsibility to push aggressively for much more innovation. My counterparts and I believe that we have an obligation to act with much more urgency. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Two areas where we should not stay stagnant, which really, Doug talked about this earlier, in a world of increasing demand, staying stagnant really means we're going backwards at a pretty good clip. We should not stay stagnant. Instead, we should push for the good of the American traveling public, and we should push forward for the good of our country. The most pressing and immediate need is air traffic control reform. And as everybody knows here, there's a House bill under consideration right now that, if passed, would separate air traffic control from the FAA and put ATC into a separate, independent, not-for-profit entity that would move faster and take greater advantage of technology. Let's talk about why this is needed and why this bill should be passed. I'll start with some good news, and that's that competition is alive and well in our industry. Fares are low. If you go back for 25 years, the number of people flying in our country is up 83%, and that's because fares, when you adjust for inflation and add in all of the fees that people talk about, fares are down by 36%. So it's never been a better time to fly, right? Well, in some ways that's true, but in some ways maybe not. Why? Because we're seeing block times steadily increase. Block time originates from chocks. Chocks are what you put on the wheels of the airplane. You take the blocks off when the airplane leaves one gate, you put them back on when it gets to the new gate at the destination. It's the total amount of time it takes from leaving one airport to get to the next. Because the skies are crowded, airlines are expanding block times when we should be shrinking them. We're expanding block times so that we have a shot of keeping the on-time commitments we make to our customers. So your trips are getting longer when they should be getting shorter. It's a nationwide problem. Under today's system, air traffic is largely manually controlled by air traffic controllers, who honestly do an incredible job with the tools that they have. For the en route portion of a flight, to be fair, the routing is often fairly direct. But once an airplane starts descending, that's where the air traffic controller is giving very specific manual instructions to each airplane on each flight. Tomorrow night, I'm going to board our flight number 3 from Reagan National to Seattle. About 30 minutes before touchdown, our pilots will likely receive a series of commands from the air traffic controllers. They'll be told to fly different headings, descend at certain altitudes, level off and power up the engines, descend again, slow down, maintain speed, and so on. We've all heard the ATC chatter on TV and in the movies. It might go something like Alaska 3, descend and maintain flight level 240. Let's go down to 24,000 feet. Alaska 3, turn right 360 for metering. What that means is you're going to turn because you need to slow down to provide for right spacing between airplanes. Alaska 3, descend and maintain 13,000. Go down to 13,000 feet. Alaska 3, clear direct Woody. That's a spot in the sky that they want you to fly to. Alaska 3, cleared for the ILS 34 right approach. That's something I'm going to talk more about in a minute. Alaska 3, clear to land. That's actually a pretty good flight. There are a lot of flights would have a lot more step downs and level offs, would have a lot more vectors. Billy, some would have holds that they fly. With SeaTac getting crowded, some airplanes start turning circles over Idaho to space airplanes going into Seattle. So today, then we go that gets us down to 2,000 feet. Then at 2,000 feet, the aircraft goes to fly what we call today an ILS approach. The technology we're relying on today from 2,000 feet today is called an ILS, or an instrument landing system. As many of you in this room know, an ILS is a pair of ground-based radio signals or beams. They're 2 straight lines or planes. The lateral beam is called the localizer. It's a lateral line that you can literally see on a map that allows the airplane to line up with the runway and land. And then the vertical beam is called the glide slope. And that's a beam that the pilot will fly down to the runway. These radio beams work great, except for they have 2 major limitations. 1, they have to be straight lines, and 2, they're only 10 miles long. So that you've got this problem connecting from the airplane at 40,000 feet down to this ILS approach. But things could be different, and things could be a lot better. Rather than the series of verbal commands I just shared, what if on my flight tomorrow night, the pilots were given a waypoint, a specific spot in the sky, And that was where all the points in Seattle, all the flights coming into Seattle gathered. All the flights coming in from the east gathered to start it down. These waypoints often have 5-letter names, so let's just call this point DCNDR for descender, descend here. For those of you that don't know the Northwest, maybe this spot in the sky is 100 miles from Seattle, somewhere near Yakima. Long before we get to Yakima or to descender, the controllers would tell our airplane to get there at 9:32 p.m. American Airlines, because Doug Parker's in the room, they're told that they get to be there at 9:30 p.m. And Robin Hayes at JetBlue, because they bid up the price of Virgin America, he's told he's told 9:34, maybe 9:38. Maybe he's told to come tomorrow. But you get the idea. By giving people specific moments to be there, we get tighter spacing inside the system. The pilots then program the onboard flight management system, and we get there at 9:32, give or take a few seconds. And then at that point, we settle into a gentle, continuous, uninterrupted glide at idle power. We follow a precise curved path down to the runway. We transition from the en route structure to the arrival to the approach in one smooth, quiet, short, highly efficient, and automated procedure. So what is RNP? Very simply, it stands for Required Navigation Performance. That doesn't say what it is. What it actually is using GPS or satellites to guide an airplane through curving turns and continuous descents from altitude down to the runway. On the approach I just talked about, how many times did the airplane level off and the engine have to spool up? None. How many times did we turn left or right? 0. How many times would the controllers make calls to the pilot, give him new commands, him or her new commands? Maybe 1 to say clear to land. So that's what's known as a time-based arrival connected to an RMP approach. And it's one application of next-generation technology. There are many other applications. That is one application of next-gen technology. So think about what we just did. We saved a lot of time, maybe 7 minutes of flight. We saved a lot of fuel, 100 gallons of flight. We saved a lot of emissions, maybe 1 ton of CO2 per flight. Saved a lot of noise because that whole approach was flown with the power levers at the stops, at idle power. We increased the capacity of the system because we're flying more precisely. We also increased safety because we're flying much more precisely. So much goodness. I think many of you know that Alaska, together with a lot of industry partners, pioneered a lot of the building blocks of what I just talked about with advancements like RNP and hybrid Cat 3 approaches, which those allow an airplane to descend to just 30 feet above the runway before breaking out of the clouds, seeing the runway and landing. On a couple of occasions, I've flown my own airplane up to Alaska, and those trips gave me a greater appreciation of the challenges we face up there, which include rugged mountains and snow-covered runways and howling winds. Those trips were a reminder for me that no other jet airline in the world does flying quite like what we do up in the state of Alaska. And to mitigate these challenges, we pioneered back in 1996 this RNP technology to safely fly into Juneau. It's an airport that has a reputation for really difficult terrain and for being weather challenged. Our reliability into Juneau has absolutely skyrocketed in the last 21 years. Customers knew. All of our airplanes have this technology now, but 10, 15 years ago, they would say, does this airplane have RNP? They wanted to be on the airplanes with RNP. So what I think you're seeing on the screen is an RMP approach into Juneau. So our airplanes weave a curved path through the Gastineau Channel, which is a bending L-shaped channel before they approach the runway and land. This approach happens to be in good weather so that you can see it, but we often fly this approach through the clouds. It's simply a work of art. So it's fairly easy to see which system makes better use of the constrained airspace that we have. Alaska became the first airline with a 100% RNP-equipped fleet years ago, and today we use this technology at 42 airports nationwide. And even though we're arguably the RNP leader, we use this technology on just 5% of our approaches. So this technology, which was proven 21 years ago, is largely unused today. So here's the problem. Innovations like this have to be approved for every approach to every runway end in the system. And they're being rolled out at a snail's pace. At the current course and speed, our delays and congestion as Doug said earlier, will get worse and worse and worse because demand for air travel is growing more rapidly than the rollout of technology. The technology has existed for 21 years. This is not a technology conversation. It's a conversation about creating a funding model and a governance model where speed and innovation are prized. It's a conversation about developing a structure where very substantial capital investments and other investments will be made and where proven technology will be rapidly deployed. Incremental changes haven't gotten us to where we need to get, and they're not going to get us there. What we need is transformational change. Almost all industrialized countries have separated air traffic management from their version of the FAA. You've heard, and you'll continue to hear industry leaders talk about this today. In fact, it's such a good idea that JetBlue has a video on their in-flight entertainment system talking about the benefits of NextGen and displaying a map of all, it might be up there now, a map of all of the industrialized countries that have separated their ATC function from their version of the FAA. We can do this, and we can make this work for both commercial and general aviation. And we're asking Congress to act. Speaking as a GA pilot myself, I personally believe this will benefit the non-commercial segments of the industry as well. To be totally clear, this isn't a criticism of the FAA. They're doing what they can with the current structure and the current funding model. We just need a structure that will get us back to being the best in the world with air traffic management and that will free the FAA to do what they're best at, which is setting standards and overseeing safety. While the FAA reauthorization is on the floor of the House, let's turn our attention to what's happening in the north wing of the Capitol. In the Senate, there's legislation pending to allow the federal government to determine whether certain fees that airlines charge are unreasonable. It's known as the Fair Fees Act. Its title suggests that the motivation is to protect consumers from being gouged by the airlines. We would argue that it's a solution in search of a problem. A couple of points on this. First, while the federal government has an important role to play when it comes to consumer protection, this provision goes way too far. It regulates airline pricing, plain and simple, which is directly counter to deregulation. Second, adding more regulation has the opposite effect of what a free market and deregulation has given to consumers, which is competition and lower fares. As I mentioned earlier, fares are at historical lows while more people than ever are flying. Alaska competes successfully as a low-fare carrier offering a premium product. Competition among the airlines is relentless, and this legislation goes against airlines who are constantly improving their products and services while offering low fares. We know there are concerns with airline customer service. However, we would urge Congress to not go down this slippery slope of re-regulation because the facts demonstrate that the American traveling public has benefited from lower fares and the greater choice that the free market provides. Robin isn't here, but before I thought some of you, especially him, might be interested in how we're doing with Virgin America. In the interest of time, I'll keep this very brief, and what I'll simply say is that things are going very well. We're making investments in new airplanes, in new routes, in upgraded interiors. We're bringing satellite on board our airplanes, free movies, free texting, as we bring the two airlines together. We expect to have a single operating certificate, and we expect the majority of our computer systems, including the PSS, the passenger reservation system, we expect all of those systems will be cut over and we'll have a single certificate with the FAA in the first and second quarters of 2018. You might say that things are under construction now, and they are, but we're feeling very good about the merger and about our future. As I wrap, let's go back to the Silicon Valley notion of building the airplane while we're flying it. Well, that's a plane that I don't think any of us want to get on. Our technology colleagues in the Silicon Valley have the right idea. Continual innovation is a must for every industry. And this innovation will only occur in the right setting, with the right funding model and the right governance structure, and most importantly, where the right culture of innovation exists. We at Alaska Airlines, along with most or perhaps all of the other airlines, urge Congress to find a way to separate air traffic control from the FAA and put ATC into an independent, not-for-profit entity so that we can modernize our skies and regain our position as the international leader in air traffic management. And we also urge Congress to not step backwards to re-regulate the industry. Thanks very much for your time today.